And welcome into In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. Hey there, I'm Aaron Chuslock. And as we do each week, we walk the path of some of the all-time great players and coaches here in the upstate of South Carolina. And there aren't many with better resumes than the gentleman we have joining for us here today. Levon Kirkland, one of the all-time greats in Clemson football. A member of the NFL's all-decade team in the 1990s. Levon, first of all, thanks for making some time for us. How you doing so far?
I'm doing well, Aaron. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I know you've been in the news lately. On the ballot for the College Football Hall of Fame, only 78 guys on the ballot right now for 2022. We're going to go into a list of accomplishments that you've had throughout your football career. But as far as the collegiate career goes, I got to imagine getting into this Hall of Fame would really put a bow on it for you.
I really will. I mean, to be recognized nationally for what you've done in college, the kind of player you were, it's really a blessing. And I'm really happy about this. And it just makes me feel good that that little kid back in Lamar really dreamed about being in the NFL. And, sometimes you don't think about things like the Hall of Fame. So to be nominated is definitely a thrill for me.
This isn't the first time that we're looking back on your college career favorably of late. You were in the Clemson Ring of Honor in 2019 for the Boston College game, if I remember correctly. Right. You were the first player to get added since 2001. It's pretty exclusive company there. Pretty good indicator of the regard in which your college football career is held here in the upstate. Are you looking back on that as almost a precursor? Like, I know how this feels to be recognized for my college accomplishments already.
Yeah. When I got that call from Tim Beret about being in the Ring of Honor, I actually called him back like twice because I just really couldn't believe it that I was going to be on Death Valley. That's a huge, huge honor for me, and not just for myself, but also for my family. I think about my deceased mother and father and the sacrifices that they did. I think about my deceased wife, Keisha, my brother, Ernest. And that was the one thing I just wish they were there to share with me, but I know they're in heaven and they shared it with me. So, yeah, it was huge. It was huge for my family. It's huge for the last name Kirkland. And, for Clemson to see me in that light is totally amazing.
I'm going to touch back on some of the things I had listed here, but, we've seen a new era of Clemson football over the last few years. You have to imagine that some other names are going to be joining you on the Ring of Honor. How exclusive do you think that list should be? Because there's two national championship teams since the 81 team now. And when you look at the number of key players on those teams, you can make a case for a lot of them. So how exclusive do you think it should be? And, we're not going to get into who makes the cut, who doesn't. But a lot of folks get credit for those championship runs of late.
Yeah, Coach Dabo Swinney and this current regime of Clemson football has been amazing. I think that you may have to expand the stadium a little bit if you're going to put some of the names that I think really deserve to be up there. Yeah, it should definitely be an exclusive club, but there's some guys who have been extra special. And I don't see how you'd not honor those guys. So although I'm on it, you would think like, no, don't let many other people on it. I think that you have to really examine everything as far as how they get on it. I think it's not just about being a football player, but what kind of person you were off the field. And that does come into consideration when you think about the Ring of Honor, how they represented themselves. And there are plenty of guys who've done a great job of that. So I think it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be the next person. But as I said before, Aaron, when you look around the stadium, there's not really enough room. They're going to have to expand it some kind of way, or maybe make it, maybe dedicate a side of the stadium or something that put the rest of the Ring of Honor guys on there. But it's going to expand like I said, there's some terrific names that are going to be eligible for us. So I'm just looking forward to seeing who's going to be the next person.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the last 10 years or so, just as a whole, it's pretty startling to think about the amount of people that truly, when you look at the accolades on an individual basis, and then those that helped key championship runs, that is not a conversation that will be easy to have with some of the guys that are close on that list, one way or the other. I know you're busy as well with your new role in the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame, the 2020 induction, as typical 2020 fashion, had to get axed due to the pandemic. But back in 2021, how excited are you to get this thing going in July?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I think also, not only with the Hall of Famers, guys like Steve Spurrier, Robert Porcher, Art Baker, Steve Weiss, all the names that we have on there, I think is wonderful. They represented the state of South Carolina very well. And we want to make sure that we honor all the great players, all the great coaches, all the contributors to the state of South Carolina. If South Carolina doesn't do anything else well, it seems to produce a lot of good football and a lot of good football players. So we're proud of that fact. We want to make sure that we honor those people because they're great leaders and they're great representation of football and what it can do for you. And then also we're really excited about the Bridge Builders Excellent Award. We got 10 finalists that we're kind of going through the process of seeing who's going to be the winner. And this is one of the awards that we're really proud of because it talks about not only what they've done on the field, but what they've done off the field and the leadership that they've shown in the community. So we feel that we should honor those young men. So that's going to be very exciting for us as well.
We're going to touch on your career here in just a second, but I got to imagine that the fact that you're in this role, being able, and we'll look at the bridge builder thing here in particular, the fact that you can be a mentor to these young players, and you just mentioned and I'm honestly, I'm from Baltimore, but I'm blown away by the amount of talent that South Carolina has in the high school ranks and the amount of them that end up playing in big time college football and some even professionally as well, stars in the National Football League. To be able to give that insight from your perspective to help this new crop of players hopefully walk that same path to the pros. How gratifying is that for you when you're talking about a guy who's played in Super Bowls and played championship football? I'm curious how you relate that to successes on the field as well.
Well, I look at me, for example, and, although I had a very successful career, I look back on it and I really wish I'd had a little bit more mentors, some guys who could have done what I've done and pour back into a young person like myself. During the time that I went through, it was kind of more survival. You just didn't have anybody to really guide you. You didn't really have a network or resources. So you had to kind of get things done on your own. And I personally felt like, I would never want to go through that, or I wouldn't want a young man to go through that. And, you see so much potential and so much talent that don't quite make it. And I'm not talking about making it NFL. I'm talking about being successful in life because maybe you put everything into football and it didn't work out for you. So what we try to do with the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame is we educate, empower, and encourage those student athletes. And we try to be a resource for them as they go through this process. Like I said before, I went through the process and we didn't have enough mentors that are around, mentors that I could relate to. So you kind of had to, do things yourself. So I think with the connection of the Hall of Famers that we have, the mentors that want to give back, the programs that are already out there, we're trying to galvanize those together and make sure that everybody knows the resources that they have. Everybody understands that they can go to someone for help. So I'm very passionate about it. I'm very passionate about the state of South Carolina. I want it to be in a better place. And the way you do that is you start with young people, and you invest in them, and you try to build them up so later on they can build the state up. My mother used to say this all the time about how you treat young people. And, because they're going to be the ones that take care of you later on in life. And I really have taken that advice very seriously. And I'm going to give back. I'm going to do whatever I can for the state of South Carolina to be the very best it can be. We're ranked 43rd in the nation as far as college and career readiness is concerned. To me, that's not good enough. And I think anybody who's in the state of South Carolina, you're invested in it. You got skin in the game. And it's something that we have to take control of ourselves. It's something that we have to take the responsibility. This is our duty to take care of our young.
Well, it's one of the cooler things that I've seen happen here in the state. And if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to go to the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame's website, look at their Bridge Builder campaign. There are a lot of athletes that say that we're looking to give back to the community. Without question, Levon Kirkland is doing just that and more in this new role that he has. But the show is called In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports, and we do want to go back in time and walk your path with you just a little bit. And maybe my favorite Levon Kirkland story is played at Lamar High, and this sounds silly in hindsight, but Levon Kirkland wasn't getting any looks as far as college programs. And if you could just walk us through that a little bit. You made the playoffs your senior year, and then college scouts are in the stands to look at other players, and then here comes Kirkland standing out in tape.
Yeah, actually it was my junior year. We were playing Chapin High School, and I actually developed a relationship with a guy named Sylvester Mayers, who became one of my best friends. But before that game, I was not getting recruited at all. I wasn't getting any looks, any letters. It was pressing, but I had the faith, and I believed in what I could possibly do. And my coach came to me just before kickoff, and he just told me, "Hey, there's some recruiters out there." Now, I knew they wasn't there to recruit me, so I was like, "Oh, okay." And I think he did that to give me really to say, like, "Hey, let's do your thing tonight." And I took it as, okay, it's time to ball. So I end up having a really tremendous game, a great game. And the next week, the University of South Carolina sent me a letter because they were there to recruit. I forget his name, but there were two guys that were recruiting from Chapin. And that's how I got recruited. And then the next week, Clemson sent me a letter, and it kind of started that recruiting thing going a little bit. But before that time, I was known in my region. And you got to think there was no internet. There was no recruiting services that I knew of. There's no rivals or anything like that. So I was probably on nobody's radar. So that's kind of how it got started. I just had a tremendous game in this playoff, and that's when the letters started coming in. Well, I still didn't get highly recruited, but, it was better than nothing.
So I'm curious, we had these giant high school football programs, specifically in the upstate of South Carolina. You look at Gaffney or Dorman or Burns. Lamar is not one of those programs. So I'm curious how frustrating it was to not see your name out there as far as recruiting. What gave you the motivation to keep going? And if you hadn't had gotten recognized, what was the plan for Mr. Kirkland moving past high school?
Wow. I really believed in my vision. And I knew it was going to happen some type of way. I just knew that I had to keep following it and keep believing it. And I think a lot of times, just in life, we have to believe in our vision. And that's what I did. I just believed in it. I really didn't see an alternative. I told my parents, I told my mother and my father, I'm like, don't worry about me. Don't worry about paying for my college, because I have 7 other siblings. and most of them, 6 of them are older. And I saw my parents every 2 years having to, they really had to pay for college. I didn't want that. I wanted to free them of that. And I told them that it's football or probably the military for me. That was the direction I was going in, and I was determined to get there. And it's kind of how it was. I just believed in my vision. I just believed in what I told myself 11 years ago. I protected that vision. I didn't let anybody talk about that vision in a negative way because I couldn't afford that doubt. And so I just rolled with it. And, also I had a coach that believed in me too. And once he said that I think you can play on a higher level or the next level, I took that advice and was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And so his words and my vision just kind of blended together. And, I was fortunate enough and blessed enough to go to Clemson University. And a lot of times you have to be in the right situation. And I was in the right situation with Clemson.
Well, I'm sure that first year you were scratching your head a little bit. Again, Levon Kirkland, one of the best defensive players in the last 30 years, redshirts his first year with the Tigers.
Yes.
But boy, did you take off after a freshman All-American in '88. At what point in that 2-year span did you realize that not can I just play with these guys? I can dominate on the defensive side of the ball. If only I had my chance. You redshirt that first year, and then you take off your redshirt freshman year. At what point did it click that, I'm not in over my head at this point?
Well, I think there were several times that it clicked for me. Even in that redshirt year where you're just really practicing and you're being a scout member, I embraced the red shirt because I knew I wasn't quite ready to jump on that level. So I was okay with the development. And I had a GA come up to me. I was just working out. And he told me, he's like, you keep working the way you work, you're going to be one of the best linebackers ever played here. And that kind of connected with what my coach said, what I believed. And I took that and I was like, okay, let's run with it. Had nobody would have ever guessed. So I think another time it clicked was I was in practice and I did a great job doing a 3-on-3 drill. And I was like, you know what? I looked around and I was like, I can play with these guys. I had to look through my team and my teammates, and I was just like, I'm just as good. I'm just as good. I know I'm from a small town. I know it's 1A, but I'm just as good. So it goes back into believing in that vision. But I was willing to do the work. I was willing to practice, and my upbringing kind of really helped me, go to Clemson and work hard and wasn't afraid of competition. So, that clicked when the GA said something. And then I think my freshman year, it was a homecoming game. We played against Duke University, and Duke was really doing well with Coach Spurrier. And they were innovators because they passed the ball around a lot. And it gave me an opportunity to rush the passer. And, I just had a knack of doing that. And I just had a really good game. And after that game, I was like, man, I could definitely play on this level. I'm no fluke. I'm not just a splash in a pan. I can play this game. And I just really believed it from that point, from that redshirt freshman year, playing against Duke, man, and being not really the full starter, but, a guy that comes in every other game I was starting. And then, I just believed, and I ended up starting the last 3 games of the year. I thought I contributed very well, was a good special team player. But football was fun for me. It really was. But I knew that I could play the game. I just needed to be developed.
You look at your Clemson resume, multiple All-ACC performing accolades, All-American honors, your Clemson team, and I'm sure this is probably the stat you like the best, 39 wins, only 8 losses, and a tie. When you think about the moment that stands out to you the most for your Clemson career, is it a moment that you've had on the field when you were playing, or is it getting inducted to the Ring of Honor where you can kind of encapsulate that entire thing into just one moment?
Well, honestly, for me, I think the breakout game, and I think the game that everybody tends to remember, is the Gator Bowl that we played against West Virginia. Major Harris being a guy who was second as far as the Heisman Trophy is concerned, and that's all we heard about before we played him. Major Harris and what he can do. Major Harris, how you guys going to stop Major Harris? And on our team, man, we had some players. We were absolutely a great defense, and it seemed like a little bit of disrespect, but I think it was just they didn't really know what Clemson was all about. Being from a small area, they just really, even though Clemson has done very well in football during that time, it was just that Major Harris and what he brought to the table, they tend to kind of just really dismissed us and thought that there was nobody who can play against this guy. He was dynamic, and no question, he was. He was probably one of the first dual threat quarterbacks that could do it all. And I just remember going to a banquet with Danny Ford and a few others, and I saw that trophy, and I'm like, that trophy will really look good at my place, the MVP trophy. And the first series we had, it was like they drove down the field. But the very next series, I was able to get a sack on Major, and I was like, "Oh, it's on. We can beat this guy," and we did. And I thought that not only me playing well, but also the whole team just really showed what kind of defense we had with the Clemson Tigers. And that was the moment where I thought, like, okay, you're on the big stage now. To do it as well as you did it this game against that type of player, that caliber of player, I felt like, yeah, this is my moment. And I was just a redshirt sophomore at the time.
It's funny, hearing you talk about that, I'm thinking of two things. One, the famous Michael Jordan meme now from The Last Dance, where he's going, and I took that personally. And the other thing is, it sounds very familiar for a lot of Clemson fans, I'm sure, who heard all that in the 18 title game about Bama's offense, how Clemson would be able to hang with them, Tua and all those guys, and we know how that played out. You get drafted by the Steelers in the second round in 92, a starter in 93. You progress into an all-pro, named the NFL's all-decade team in the 90s. Multiple playoff appearances, came up just short in the Super Bowl. I'm curious, all that success that you had in the NFL, did it make it easier to go into a winning culture like the Steelers because of all the success that you had at Clemson, where, you go into a program and, I hear coaches talk about this all the time, that if you're from a winning program, you already know how to prepare to win. I'm curious how much that played an effect for you going into the Steelers franchise.
Well, it did translate very well as far as, for me, knowing how to play against competition. And in the NFL, that's what it is. It's like you're fighting for that job. And I remember going my first mini camp, and I'm looking at these guys. I'm like, whoa, these guys can play. It's great to get drafted, but now you have to really prove yourself and earn your respect. And I knew how to do that because I went to Clemson, and I was competing against guys like John Johnson, Wayne Simmons, Ashley Shepard, the defense that we had with all those guys who went into the NFL. It was tough, man. You had to really show your mettle. And Clemson and Pittsburgh were very similar because it seemed like, defense really mattered. And it was a certain pride that was taken as far as being a Clemson defensive player and also a Pittsburgh linebacker. So going in, I wanted to establish myself as, one of the best. And not only that I belong on that stage with those guys. And we had a linebacker crew that was just, one of the best linebacker crews in the NFL history. And, Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green, may he rest in peace, and Chad Brown, we pushed each other to be the very best. But Pittsburgh had guys like Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, guys who already set the tone. And I wanted to be a part of that legacy. And the organization was great too. I mean, Pittsburgh was a great place to play. Reminds me a lot of the winning culture when I was at Clemson. And so, yeah, it was really, I was fortunate to be in a place in college where great competition, guys making you better. Then I go to the NFL, it's the same thing. Just a lot of history, a lot of tradition, and I want to be a part of that. So I was fortunate enough to be a part of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it went really well for me. Even though I had to change position because I played it outside at Clemson, and then I had to move inside. But it taught me a lot about myself. It taught me that I could do it. I was a dynamic leader, and I knew how to manage guys. Being the signal callers, setting the defense. It was more than what I did at Clemson. So I just remember Coach Cowher telling me, "You just gonna have to take over." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I got guys like Rod Woodson, Greg Lloyd, Kevin Green. You just want me to take over the huddle? This is my second year, and these guys have been all pros." But once he told me that, I was like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna have to do what I need to do," and that's what I did. I just did what I had to do, and it worked out for me.
All right, so we're talking to one of the greatest linebackers of all time, and certainly of that era. So this is the fan question that I got to ask you. Mm-hmm. One, who is the guy that you envied their defensive game more than anybody else you played with? And then two, who's the guy that still gives you nightmares that you went up against?
Wow. The guy that I loved was, and he played my position. It was just tough getting into the Pro Bowl when he was around. I would have to say that Junior Seau, may he rest in peace, was the most dynamic inside linebacker during that time. You could also say Ray Lewis as well. Those guys, I love the way they played the game. They had that energy and tenacity that, like, sometimes I wish I had. My style was more business-like, especially when I got into the NFL. It was just, I had to I had this new responsibility that I didn't have before. So I had to kind of slow my game down as far as the energy was concerned. But I love Junior and I love Ray and what they brought to the table. I really wasn't that vocal of a guy, so I couldn't bring that in. That intensity that they brought was just really special. That just wasn't really my game. The guy that gave me nightmares, you may be surprised at this, is Curtis Martin. Curtis Martin he gave us fits every single time we played him. And I think because he was really motivated because he's from the Pittsburgh area. And he was a guy that me and him got along great. We were pretty cool off the field, but on the field, Curtis Martin gave me headaches.
I think that Curtis Martin kind of gets forgotten in the shuffle there when you think about the great running backs of the 90s. It's always Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders. And, when you talk about dynamic guys, it's always Marshall Faulk. But Curtis Martin was right there, Jets, Patriots. I'm probably forgetting a team or two, but he was stellar.
Curtis Martin was one of the more underrated. He went to the Hall of Fame. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think if you played against him, you understand why he went to the Hall of Fame. Our defense was stellar, and he will rip us up for I think he's one of the only few guys that maybe got definitely over, probably 200 yards against us, which is kind of unheard of. But his game was so smooth, and he did a great job as far as seeing the field. And he knew when to cut back. And because of our aggressive style, he just really played well against us. So that's a surprise. I know most people are thinking Emmitt Smith or Barry Sanders, but I would say for me, it was Curtis Martin that gave us the most trouble, the guy that I think about all the time.
No, that's a great answer. So you finished your career, you retire in 2002, more than 1,000 tackles, a bunch of sacks, forced fumbles, 11 seasons in the league. Then you go into coaching. And you have some stints around the upstate, Woodmont, Wade Hampton. Then you're head coach at Shannon Forest, take a defensive coordinator job at Florida A&M. What drew you to the sidelines to go coach? And would you ever go back to the sidelines?
Wow. Honestly, I didn't think I was going to coach. I didn't really want to coach when I first got out. I actually wanted to see what else I could do. And so I was able to be in the admissions department at Clemson University. And I did that. And I had a guy to ask me to do a camp for him one time. And I did the camp and I'm like, wow, this is a lot of fun. It really was a lot of fun teaching these guys and they got it. And I have a personality that's it can be kind of funny. It can definitely be approachable. And I thought like, hey, why not? Maybe do it on a high school level. And that was really my thinking. And my wife was like, yeah, you should, yeah, do it. Why not? You got all this knowledge and this experience. You should give it back. Why would you hold that? And so I thought about it and I went to Wade Hampton. I just fell in love with the strategy of it all, being on the other side and helping guys get better. I've always been about helping others get better. And so I was a defense coordinator. Then I did a head coaching job, and Shannon Forest never had a football team. So it was interesting, to say the least, because you had to help guys know how to run. Like you had to teach them everything. And that was the beauty of it, because you take for granted that people know. And because and you know how to do it, that you think that automatically everybody else does. But it was kind of funny that when you're teaching and coaching, that you have to really take the steps. And my sisters are all teachers, and they really kind of helped me kind of game plan. And it was really kind of cool how it kind of fell in place. And we didn't win a game that year, but the next year, they ended up winning 4. And then the next year after that, they were 7-0. So, I mean, we started that, and that was very fulfilling. And I still kind of keep in touch with some of the guys that I coached during that time. So, yeah, the coaching thing happened. Then I got a call from my friend Earl Holmes that really wanted me to coordinate the defense. I never did it on that level, but I took the challenge and we did it. And then I got a chance to coach with the Arizona Cardinals with Bruce Arians, and also Bob Sanders was my guy that I was under. And it was great because it gave you like, man, the NFL, this is the best place to be for players. And so I don't know if I will coach again. I am a coach. And, but will it be on the sidelines? I'm not sure about that, but it will be the way that I want it to be. And it's going to be a way that's going to affect a lot of people. It's going to help a lot of people. So I see me coaching in more of a life coaching capacity than, a guy with a whistle.
Final one for me. A lot of folks that are going to be watching, listening to this, I'm curious if you could speak to the young folks that are watching this, perhaps, who want to play football, who are thinking that maybe that could be a career for them. What's the number one thing you want them to take from Levon Kirkland's story? Because it's quite the story going from Lamar High to NFL All-Pro.
Well, I think with anything that, like we talked about before, there has to be a belief and there has to be a vision of whatever you want to do. I would tell any student that they got to have a vision. They got to see themselves in the future. But it's not just about having a vision. You have to do the practice. You have to work on your craft. You have to work on the technique of how to be the very best. So although vision is a part of it, I think it's definitely the first step. To get to where you need to be, you got to be able to be willing to do the work and to do the practice. And really, sometimes you have to sacrifice certain things to get that done. But I think you always have to believe in that vision and let that carry you as much as possible. So that's kind of how I would look at it. You have a vision and you work that vision and you do the practice.
I think it's certainly words that folks should take to heart. We got a little over a minute here. Hold on, let me get this for you real quick. Your dad and your brother both good football players. Your cousin Devin's still in the NFL. Your uncle was a light heavyweight pro boxer. Who's the best athlete in the Kirkland family? And I'm expecting an unbiased opinion here.
Really, probably my mother.
Yeah.
My mother was a tremendous basketball player.
Okay, I missed that one.
And she was a point guard. And really, I tell everybody that I got my linebacker from her. Her temperament was linebacker light. She was no joke, but she was also the one that really watched games with me. And I really love that about her, that she took that time to watch the games with me because she knew how much I really loved it. But my mother was a tremendous athlete. Believe it or not.
That's a great answer, and one that you certainly can't get in trouble for. So maybe that's the best answer you can give.
Right.
Levon, I certainly appreciate the time, man. Best of luck on the College Football Hall of Fame. Again, one of just 78 on the ballot for the 2022 class. And of course, we'll catch up with Levon coming up here a little bit later in July for the South Carolina Football Hall of Fame as well, in which he is also an inductee. So again, thank you so much for joining us, Levon. Thank you for joining us here on In Depth with Fox Carolina Sports. We'll have another great episode for you next week. Have a great one.